So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to read.
And you said representations and what?
Representations and the big picture, big ideas.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to read along with the full unit narrative. So we'll have our books open to that, but we're also going to be watching a video along with it. So you guys can take notes however you'd like. You can annotate on your sticky notes or on your scrap paper. And what I want you guys to be focusing on is just what are the big ideas. So then just take another minute and compare kind of what you wrote down from the video and what's in these books here, and see if there's anything more you would add to your notes about the big idea. What's the big idea of this unit? What do we think? What are the important ideas that we want our students to take away?
Yeah, can we just like list some ideas to like
list them
create?
and then put them together. Yeah.
I think one thing that I read that I feel like is like the groundwork, the foundation over and over, is just really understanding, which connects back to like third grade and fourth grade, is understanding that a fraction is the same thing as the numerator and the denominator, or the division of the numerator by the denominator. And I saw that kind of throughout.
And that fractions are quotients, which means they have to understand what a quotient is. They need to have that vocabulary. It also highlighted different ways to represent.
I was just going to say they can create those interchangeably.
Okay.
So
representations?
Yes, whether it's fractions as division or fractions as multiplication, but understanding conceptually what that looks like.
They also have to do area with fractional side lengths.
The other thing that stands out to me, just in that learning goal statement at the top, to go along with your representations, is just that statement of A divided by B equals A over B.
Yeah, and understanding that those are variables too.
Yeah.
I think that's important. So that's another vocab to highlight.
And I think going back to like what you talked about at the very beginning, we're going to look at the big ideas and representations. I think that the end goal of being able to see areas of rectangles with side lengths as whole numbers and fractional amounts, I think as we go through each part of it, those different representations helps to support that.
What are some things that we see over and over again? Is there anything that we see that repeats itself, or what kind of stands out as what's the biggest idea? If we were to just make a statement, what might we want to say the big idea of the unit would be?
What about something like understanding the relationship between multiplication and division helps us to understand how that relates to fractions?
So
I like that. I think we're on the right track.
understanding fractions as division and multiplication.
I think that maybe that might be it. Do we all feel good about that? I do too. Okay, so then if we know that our big unit goal is this, we want our kids to understand the relationship between fractions and that division, fractions and the multiplication, that there is a connection there. So let's dive in deeper and look more specifically at the section level.
I think their first bullet point is very straightforward.
I know.
I mean,
I don't know how we would put
Yeah.
No, that's
it
great.
in our own, but represent and explain the relationship between division and fractions.
B. So it looks like in order to get here, the first thing they're going to do is look at that relationship. So then what are they going to move on to in B?
It's almost like in my brain, I'm thinking that I'm just looking at the first two bullet points with the third one. It's like they're exploring the relationship between multiplication and division to connect that to fractions.
Fraction. So, okay, let's move on to section C. And how about this time, maybe just kind of talk together about your ideas before we share out? That might be a little bit, might help us.
reasoning piece in.
I think we have to have the reasoning piece in
I
there
do.
because
I
that's
think
huge.
that's important. I think that, and that builds onto that understanding, because if you look at what they're doing in section A, section B, section C is really pulling all that learning together and making sure my answer does make sense.
Right.
So now let's look at some work. So I think the next piece is to look at what might students come across in IM, because I think a lot of times when we see what they are going to have to attack, I think it can add some things to maybe some of our big ideas. So the way that we're going to do this one is I will give you each 2 of these cards. These are just examples of activities that are in the unit. And so then just look at your cards and try to decide, where does it fit? Would it be section A, section B, or section C? So what ideas are being approached here? And then does this change our thinking, or does it add to, should we add anything to what we think the big ideas are based on how they're going to be asked to approach it?
Okay, so
They're going to go, okay, well, wait a minute. How am I going to see this? Is this one whole? But if you look at it, this breaks it down right here. And if we pay attention to that throughout the lesson and just make sure that we're saying that this is one unit right here, and you can see that again right here. So they're keeping that the same also, that I think that we can kind of ground back to.
And let's just talk about what are the ideas in this standard and how does it connect up to our big ideas, and which sections do we see this in?
I think that first part of it
Yeah.
really just is the unit. It's the whole
Absolutely.
thing.
Okay, so then knowing that this is where we want them to be, what background knowledge do we expect them to come with? Do they need to be successful, or have they been exposed to in the past? Well, they come with. So then we feel good about background? So then if we're going to look at skills, so let's look at kind of the key skills. And I think the conversation is just going to happen organically to put in that vocabulary. So then, if this is what we know, we want them to know, so then what's that going to look like? That's our big question, right? So I'm going to actually take one of these. So if this is the problem, let's start to think about for our show, what might we expect a student to turn in for this problem? All right, so just take a second and solve it, I guess, and then maybe take some notes of what you think you would expect up here. And I'll try to collect what I hear you guys talking about. So then I'll just let's maybe write an exemplar, not like an exemplar, but just sort of, if this is what we expect. So which one do you want to do, the first, second, or third one? I'll just write out the response because these are just sort of notes.
Like what they have to be able to show.
Yeah, what would they show?
Put together.
So step 4 is looking at those end of unit tasks.
My 6 kilometers.
Okay. Awesome.